Welcome, everyone, to the Disrupting Wellbeing podcast. I am very excited about today's guest, mostly for personal reasons, because I met Dan at a book awards show. It's not a show, it's an event. And Dan, of course, was shortlisted for his new book. And so I picked his brain immediately and then read two more of his books. So as an author of working on my second book, who's in the frazzled phase, I'm in the frazzled phase of writing a book behind the scenes. I'm just so excited to have Dan Kieran on the show. Welcome to the show.
Well, what a privilege to be here. No, it's great. Thanks for having me.
So you are just so full of wisdom. I know you're probably going to be like, cringe, am I? But you've written, am I right in thinking you've written 12 books?
So, well, my name's on 14. I didn't write them all. I edited some. I edited my first ones, or co-edited. And then I started to write books after that. So it was a bit of an evolution of my writing skills, I guess. But yeah, so 14 in total, which is kind of a weird thing.
14. I mean, so obviously, you're an author, you're an entrepreneur. I know you're a lecturer. You're also the co-founder of Unbound, which you've, I believe, kind of transitioned from. I've read several of your books. And I guess where I'll start is, because I know you've learned a few things along the way. What does success mean to you? Because you've had a lot of versions of it. So I'm curious.
That's a really interesting question. Well, it's changed over time. Yeah. I mean, I think success, my first definition of success was other people thinking I was great.
Right.
And amazing. I guess success now it's changed so much. I mean, I've gone through such a journey in the way I've lived my life and the things that I've chosen to do. So success for me now is just enjoying my day-to-day existence, enjoying now rather than working hard for something that may or may not happen in the future. So I'm always looking for success in every day, conversations and nature and people I'm with. So but I still have an ego. So, I mean, I still aspire to achieve things. I want my books to sell. I want to do podcasts like this. So I'm not like a hermit in like a kind of guru phase or anything like that. But I'm definitely more interested in what I call internal validation rather than external validation. And I definitely spent the first half of my life, I'm 49 now, pursuing external validation. And I discovered in the process of doing that when you think something outside you is giving you status, it's actually draining your self-worth out of you. And so now I'm really interested in internal validation, which is doing things with meaning. And that is nourishing. And the ego is still involved, but in a different way. So it's a bit of a rambling answer to your question. So I think it's a moving target, but and I think that's good, right? We should be evolving and we should be living life in a different way. And I could give you a different answer in 5 years' time.
And I love that. There is something profound about aging as well, in a way. Not that we're old, but we are refined, right? I've got a birthday coming up, so I'm reflective on what does age kind of mean? And it's exciting because if you are evolving, then it's kind of a sign that you're still alive and kicking in a way.
Yeah, I mean, I would hate to go back, right? You couldn't pay me to be young now.
No.
I was so uncomfortable in my own head for so long. Age is great.
Age is great. Did you always want to be a writer?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I mean, I have stories. I've told myself a story of why I wanted to become a writer, and it was I think it's true, but I was very young, and my brother and I went to the sports hall of our local sports centre. And there was a man sat on a kind of stage in the middle with the absolutely enormous queue going round and round in circles to get to the middle. And it was Roald Dahl. And he signed a book for my brother. And I wasn't getting a book signed. I was very young, 4, I guess, something like that.
Sure.
And I just knew when I met him that I was going to do that. And it sounds a bit weird, doesn't it? But that is where I first remember thinking, I'm supposed to write books. And so it's something I always wanted to do. I've always written a lot. One of my definitions of interest for my life is to pursue things I'm doing for their own sake. I had this word autotelic, It's spelled AUTOTELIC, and it's to do with flow states. And it's this idea that when you do things for their own sake, that's where the meaning comes from. So you're not goal oriented. You're kind of you do things because you just want to do them. And writing is something I've always done for no other reason than I just like doing it. I think it's how I try to make sense of myself and what I think and feel. So it's always been a tool that I've been attracted to. And like anything, if you spend enough time doing it, you get better at it. So it's become a sort of, it's become the thing I use for fulfillment, because I've got better at it over the years.
And I really want to delve into some of your books that I've read, because again, I just find them inspirational and fascinating. But I know you've talked a lot about your entrepreneur journey, right? So like, because you co-founded this thing that became a huge success, and then you made decisions to take a step back. Like, give us the 3-minute version just to kind of highlight what that journey's been like prior to maybe settling into some of this, new wisdom that you're enjoying now.
So, well, I spent 10 years writing books. My first book was a book called Crap Towns, which was a massive hit in the UK and got death threats. And it was on Channel 4 News the day it came out. It was on the front page of The Guardian. It caused real stink. And it got to number 5 on the bestseller list. And after that, I learned from publishing is that if you have a hit book, then publishers they will give you money to write another one in case you do it again. And publishing uses historical sales data to make decisions for what they're going to publish in the future. So having a hit makes you a hot property. So I basically spent 10 years coming up with ideas of stuff I wanted to do to write books about those things. So I was really into the then Blair government. I was very opposed to their anti-terrorist legislation that they were using to stop people protesting. So I did a book about protesters called I Fought the Law, which was really good fun and really interesting. And I was basically trying to shoehorn book ideas into things that I wanted to do. And another one was I drove across England in a 1957 electric milk float for a book called 3 Men in a Float, which is all about slow travel and having a laugh. And, it was about, can you enjoy the journey as much as the destination when it comes to travel? So I've always kind of had ideas for writing books that were kind of aligned with my life. But essentially what happened over 10 years is that I got better at writing and I got closer to the books I wanted to write, but my sales declined. So I was no longer hot property anymore. I was someone that had a hit a long time ago.
And that does something to the ego, doesn't it?
Well, it's weird because I felt more fulfilled and I felt prouder of what I was doing, but I was less attractive to publishers. And this happened around 2008 when the financial crash happened and publishers, like everybody, just started to tighten their belts. And at that stage, I was doing a lot of travel writing for newspapers like The Times and The Guardian, because I was the slow travel writer. So I was the travel writer that didn't fly. That was kind of like my shtick.
Yeah.
And so the crash happened. Publishers stopped buying books from anybody that isn't already really successful. That's a massive simplification, but essentially what happened. The travel sections in newspapers just get closed in recessions because people aren't spending money. Advertising revenue drops. So I basically had no livelihood, and I'm a double university dropout. I went twice and I dropped out twice because I just didn't get on with it. And the second time more because I had a bit of a mental health issue. Well, a major mental health issue that meant I was agoraphobic, so I couldn't go to university because I was ill. But essentially, to cut a long story short, I figured out that I'd sold 350,000 copies of my books around the world, but I didn't know the name and address of a single person that had ever bought one. Mm-hmm. And I just thought, that's insane. Someone's got to build a publishing house that brings authors and readers together. So readers get to choose what is published, not what was successful last year. And authors get to pitch their ideas to the only people that really matter, because publishers don't sell books to readers, they sell them to shops. And there's a slight difference, but very important difference. So that's how I sort of accidentally started a company, because I was the only one of the founders that didn't have a job, and they said, well, you should be CEO, Dan. And I'm like, yeah, I'll be CEO. I have no idea what that means, and I have no experience or anything.
CEO, yeah.
I'll just have the business card. And I spent 12 years on the most insane journey, which was incredibly exciting. We were very hot. Kickstarter had just started. Crowdfunding was a very hot area. We had a lot of interest from Amazon and big publishing houses wanted to meet and talk. One of our books, The Wake, was longlisted for the Man Booker Prize, which was considered an astonishing feat. So we were very hot, and we had big, amazing books like Letters of Note, and I was raising venture capital to keep this going, and we got bigger and bigger, and we went down a few blind alleys. But the thing I think that's relevant to our conversation is that I discovered quite early on that all my weaknesses were going to be put under a microscope, and that everything, all of my flaws in that role, were going to be exposed to the light. And so from a sense of self-preservation, I basically had this insight that if I was going to keep ahead of the demands running a business was going to place on me, I would have to sort myself out. I would have to figure out why I reacted the way I did to certain situations. If I was going to lead other people, I had to learn to lead myself. And I've always been a deeply curious person. And I actually found that journey, I call it the second journey of like individual development, alongside the kind of creative part, the career path you're going on. I found that more interesting than running the company, frankly. But it meant that I was in a stronger and stronger mental health position to handle what was going to happen. And then, out of the blue comes Brexit and then the pandemic. And I had to kind of use those skills that I developed. And that was an incredibly tough time, but I enjoyed it more than any other time in the business, weirdly, because I was proving myself to myself. And then as a result of that, I got to a place where I realized I'd not outgrown the business, because that sounds condescending, but I had outgrown the journey.
That makes sense.
I sort of outgrown the journey the business was going to take me on. That's what it felt like. And that's when I knew I needed to leave. And I sort of figured that, not that it had nothing to teach me anymore, but that I learned the stuff from it that I needed to know in order to do something else.
So these sound like the conclusions of a process in time. So I'm wondering what the symptoms were that something wasn't quite right, that then led you to these conclusions, if that makes sense.
Yeah, well, I think it's what I always do. The analogy I always do is all the books I wrote up until The Idle Traveller, I was basically selling an idea before I'd done the book.
Sure.
So I was coming up with ideas in the pub and trying to sell them to publishers, getting the money, and then going and doing the thing and writing a book about it. The Idle Traveller was the first time where I'd spent 20 years traveling slowly for its own sake. And then I sat down and wrote a book about it. And it is my best book, I think. Well, maybe recent ones are good too, but that up till that point, that was by far my best book. And it kind of taught me that to be true to yourself is more important than the market. And a similar thing happened running Unbound, where I started off thinking, I just need to be rich and successful and have loads of money, and then I can go back to writing books again. That's how I'm going to do it. So I felt like I was authentic running Unbound, and I ran it in an authentic way, but it never quite felt like what I was supposed to be doing. And I felt like I was being a bit, not conniving, but I was being a bit dishonest with myself. But I felt like that didn't matter, because everybody does that, right? Everybody cuts himself in half and has like the work mindset and then the life mindset. And I certainly grew up thinking that those things, it's very hard for those things to be aligned, that you're always doing that. You're always trying to pull yourself apart in some way.
Well, that's what society tells us is the path to
suffering is virtue,
which you should want.
Yeah, exactly that. And so I think what happened was, as I did more work on myself, I developed more internal validation and confidence to trust the insight that I wasn't being authentic to me in that role anymore. And that basically gave me the confidence to go. But it was small things, it was like some of the decisions the business had to make, day-to-day running a company is really tough. It's not firing people particularly, although that's never pleasant. And you feel, I remember there was one fundraise where if I didn't raise the money, we were going under. And I thought we would do it, but I wasn't completely sure. And a member of staff sat down across me, asked for a meeting, and he said, I'm about to sign up to a mortgage and I need to know my job's secure. And I know you're raising money and I want to know whether we're going to do it. Can I take the mortgage down? And it was, I mean, I had no choice, regardless of the situation at that moment, other than to tell him he had to do it because it's the right thing for his family. And of course, I'm going to raise the money because being the boss means you have to have a higher tolerance for risk than your staff, right? That's what it means to be the boss. One of the things it means.
Yep.
And it's not reasonable to share your fear with other people whose tolerance is less than yours when, frankly, they're not getting paid the money to have that headache. And as it was, we raised the money and everything was fine and everything went well. But there was a moment in that meeting where I was like, okay, I've become somebody else. Like I've had to say something
that you don't know if you quite believe in.
No, but I'm because of this role I'm in, I have to believe it. And I did believe it. I'm very good at raising money. It's one of the things I do now is I help people raise money. But there was just this thing in my brain that was like, this doesn't. And so it was lots of things like that, lots of moments, decisions, things you overhear. A different generation of business leaders want you to run the business in a certain way. I'm trying to run it in a way that's authentic to me. They've grown up and progressed through career structures that are all about toughness, punishment, fear. And I'm trying to protect my staff from that because my instinct is you get best out of people through love. Like you give people a safe environment, a place where they can freedom to fail. They're far more effective than if they're frightened. So for a long time, I felt like I was almost like a human shield between the people who felt the business should be being run in a certain way based on their own authentic experience. I happen to profoundly disagree with, and I was having to kind of persuade them, or I just felt like I was caught in the middle. Yeah, I just began to feel caught in the middle all the time, and then I linked that to this thing that I just felt like I wasn't supposed to be doing it anymore, and then mixing that in with my own journey of, I did so much therapy, and I did a thing called the Hoffman process. I did loads of work on phobias. I did loads of family stuff on my family history that I was doing over that 10-year period. And I think I just developed gradually more confidence to listen to that authentic voice saying, it's enough. It's time to go and do something different. Which was a whole new challenge in itself and incredibly difficult for other reasons, but ultimately worth it in the end.
So before we go to that bit and sort of where it led you, I'm curious if your mental health challenges, we didn't go into them fully, but in the early stages, whatever those crash points were and how it led you to feeling, do you think that was the seed that led you to I have to lead a truthful, authentic life because the risk of not doing so is poor mental health? I'm simplifying it, but I would resonate this to my addictions and my own mental health stuff, that leading a double life is bad for my mental health. And that's bad for everyone. And there's a ripple effect. I don't know. Is that a seed for you?
Yeah, I completely agree with that. Yeah. I mean, I think what it is when you go on a journey in a business context, you have no idea where you're going. You have no idea what's ahead of you. And I write in the book, Do Start, being an entrepreneur is like going to a casino with your reputation. And the moment you realize that your reputation is on the roulette wheel and it's spinning and it's too late to take it off, because so much of it is around you. And I always say this, until you've built a business anyone can believe in, you have to make them believe in you. So you don't see a difference between you and your business. And that's why people crack up, because it becomes, it's like a plant growing on a building. Over time, if you pull the plant away, the building will fall down, and you just become so entwined with it. So I knew I had to separate myself. I knew I had to stop that happening. But at the same time, it's the first stage of entrepreneurship. So you can't avoid doing it. But what most people do is never deal with it until there's some crisis and they get fired or it all ends horribly. And I had spotted that I would have to go on that journey of separating myself. And I did that through the therapy. I thought if I'm going to leave and keep my sanity, then I have to get something out of it I have to get an exit that is mine, whatever happens. And I decided that would be strengthening my mental health. So the main therapy I did at the beginning was I had a terrible fear of flying. I hadn't flown for 20 years. So I'm trying to be a hotshot CEO and I can't fly anywhere. So I had to go and figure that out. So I went and had a year of cognitive behavior therapy.
CBT, yeah.
And which was amazing. And we did, the guy that I did it with had loads of other things he did. And we did loads of stuff on, not like PTSD sounds too crazy. It wasn't as crazy as that, but I had agoraphobia when I was in my late teens and early 20s. And I just used to have like constant panic attacks. So I didn't go out, essentially. So I knew my anxiety, which I'd always had, I knew it was rooted in something I hadn't dealt with. And this is what I mean about the spotlight on you. I was like, I have to figure that out. I have to go there and sort that out so that I can be functional in this role I now have. Otherwise, I'm not going to be able to handle it. And I need to handle it because I've got children and a mortgage and I've got a salary and my reputation's on a roulette wheel. And if I fail, I'm ruined forever, which is what you say to yourself.
Is
like,
how you feel. Yeah.
So you kind of got all these insane stresses. So it was kind of self-preservation. I was like, okay, well, how do I make myself stronger? And then I stumbled on the thing I think that saved me actually is my wife, Isabel, got pregnant and I decided to give up booze with her to sort of share her teetotal pain. And I woke up every morning and I was like, I just felt incredible. I was like, what the hell's going on? And then I had the insight that I'd basically been drinking a couple of times a week, getting drunk, since from like 15 to, how old was I then? I would have been 42. And I realized that I had no idea what the adult version of myself was like without regularly ingesting a depressant.
Right.
And I started to think, oh God, maybe all my lifelong anxiety issues and all this has been because I've been regularly ingesting this depressant all the time to make me feel better.
And that's how we met. This is just reminding me. We met reaching for the water jug in a boozy book event. Yeah, it was like, hey, here, have the jug of water first, or whatever it was. Interesting, because I don't think people connect the dots between alcohol as a depressant, even though it's the most socially acceptable kind of thing out there, but also anxiety inducing. So how much is it the environments we put ourselves in, but then also what we put into our body that is perpetuating our thinking and poor mental health? It's like we're not connecting the dots. So how did that change things for you?
Well, it just became a superpower, and I just had so much more confidence. And it's things like I went to a stag night, and a guy comes up. We're all at this. It was chess boxing. I mean, how do you even invent these things? Yeah, these people, they would punch each other and they'd stop and play chess. And then they'd have another round of boxing. It was completely insane. But anyway, this guy shows up with a tray of tequila shots. And he's like, who's doing everyone's got to do tequila shots. And I'm like, no, I'm not drinking. And it's like, oh, come on, yeah. And I was like, look, dude, one of the things about being 40 is you don't have to do shit you don't want to do anymore.
Yeah.
I don't want one. And the guy next to me looked at him and he was like, actually, I don't really want one either. And then the whole succession of people like, actually, no. And in the end, I think 4 of them had them all, which kind of, anyway.
Yeah.
But I would never have had the guts to do that before. I would have just gone along with it just to not be awkward and embarrassing. And so it sort of, it staled me. It sounds weird because people struggle with you when you don't drink. It's like you're making some comment about their own life choices. And it's almost more challenging for me. Like I didn't find the not drinking challenging when I realized I wasn't giving anything up. I was benefiting from feeling terrible all the time. And, boo, it's just, I don't know. I don't like it. I do drink sometimes. I've discovered there's a conversation you can only have with men if you have a couple of pints. So I go out like literally once a month and have 3 pints with a group of friends. But that's it. But no, and then I started running, because I was like, okay, I need how running makes me feel. I've never liked running, but I like how it makes me feel. So I started to run a lot. So I've given up booze, I'm running, and I'm just feeling amazing, and I'm making better decisions. So everyone around me is like falling to the wayside when stress happens. And I'm like, it's fine. We're going to do this and we're going to do this. And I just started to show up in a way that I hadn't before. And that just again breeds confidence. People look at you differently. Oh my God, he's really together. If he's together, I can stop panicking. I mean, the pandemic is a classic example of that, where everyone is just shitting themselves. And I had a meeting with my staff at the beginning, and they were all on Zoom for the first time, people trying to figure out how to use it. And they're all like, damn, we need certainty. We need you to give us certainty. And I was like, I can't do that, but I can help you cope with uncertainty. So this is what we're going to do.
Nice.
And it was that kind of thing that you're like we had to go down to 4-day week. We had to save money. So I brought the management team in and I said, look, this is the situation. I need you to all go to a 4-day week, but it's up to you. And these are the numbers.
Right.
So I was just really transparent in that process. And that's the thing that enjoy is the wrong word, because obviously the pandemic was horrendous. But it showed me a side of myself that meant I felt bulletproof.
You were able to step up.
Yeah. And I just didn't find any of it intimidating. Even when we had to make really tough decisions, I was like, you know what?
This is the world.
This is the way it is. And we can do this. So, as you can imagine, over like a period of like 4 or 5 years with that attitude, I just grew away from the company. I was like, I want things that this business I'm running isn't going to give me, because you're running around the same track every year. Oh, you've hit your numbers. Oh, next year you've got to hit new numbers, and you've got to find another book that's going to be, and you're just in this kind of like repetitive cycle. And I was just a bit like, you know what?
Just get a bit bored.
Yeah, and we're in the best place we'd ever been, and I did a fundraise. We were properly capitalized, and because I knew I was going, I kind of prepared for it in the team. It wasn't a shock, and
you reflected. From where I'm sitting, you did things right. Like you left the team and it was a good time, all the things. Did you still have some form of identity crisis afterwards, or a dip, or a like, holy shit moment?
Yeah, completely. I mean, the being authentic to me, what that meant was I wanted to finish a novel I'd started, was 7 years ago now. I'd been part of my journey to become a better boss. I got a coach, an amazing guy called Heath Ellis, who's incredible. And he explained to me that because my authentic purpose was like communication and writing, that if I don't do that, I'm just going to gradually crumble. It's not like a nice to have. If I don't do it, I'm just not going to be in the world. So I have to prioritize it. And I'm like, dude, I haven't got time to write. I'm running a company. It's the pandemic. He's like, no. It's like that Dalai Lama quote. If you haven't got time for an hour's meditation, you do 2 hours meditation. So he basically got me the discipline of every day I would write for an hour before I started work on my novel. And it was incredible, because what it did was I didn't resent my job because it wasn't keeping me from doing the thing I feel like I'm supposed to do. It was like a flow state. So when I came out of my writing, I got the joy and mental beauty of being in a flow state. And then when it finished, when the day came, whatever it threw at me, I was like bulletproof. It's like, yeah, I could do that. I can deal with this. Oh, that's terrible, but we'll do this, this, and this. Oh, we've got a legal letter. Oh, okay, we'll figure it out. I just became someone that could cope.
Perspective was different.
Yeah, totally. So when I left, I was like, I'm going to leave to write a novel. But what I actually did was I knew I was going to leave a couple of years before. And what I actually did was work out what I knew I would need to be able to make such a big jump, which was so counterintuitive. Like, everyone around me thought I was crazy. And that meant money. So I basically saved enough money to pay the bills for the family for 18 months. And once I had that money, I basically told everyone I'm taking a sabbatical. So I said I'm leaving to have a sabbatical to write my novel. And they all thought I'd won the lottery or had made loads of money, or people said, you've either had a breakdown or you've retired. There was no other reason why someone in their late 40s would leave their job where they're doing so well. But I basically spent a year just figuring out who I was without the burden of all of that pressure in business. And that was the best gift I could have given myself, because it just gave me the headspace.
How did you do that? How did you do that? And what did you discover? This is me just being personal. I don't care about my audience right now. Guys, I love you. But Dan, how did you figure out at that age who you were?
Well, you've heard of Carl Jung's theory of 2 adulthoods?
Mm-hmm.
That basically, I discovered that. And for those who haven't heard of it, Carl Jung had this theory that we have two adulthoods, and the first adulthood is spent going out into the world, achieving definitions of success, meaning, and contentment that you accept from the world around you when you're young. So from your parents, your culture, your country. And you're too young to critically appraise those definitions. So you just go and pursue them. And then he said, what happens is you either achieve them or you don't. It actually doesn't matter whether you achieve them or not. But the pursuit of them teaches you that they're the wrong definitions because they're not yours. They're definitions you accepted when you were too young to question it. And so the second adulthood is the journey to figure out what your own definitions of success, meaning, and contentment are. And that's not a finish line. That's going to, as we talked about earlier, success, like that's going to change over time. So I found that out just as I left. So I was like, and there's this great guy called James Hollis who wrote this book called The Middle Passage, Misery and Meaning in Midlife.
Yeah? I read it as soon as we met.
I told you to read it. Yeah, exactly.
It was like the most profound book ever.
Yeah.
Dark, but good.
But what's amazing about that book is that he says, if you're terrified, you've taken the jump from something that everyone thinks you're crazy, but you know in your gut this is the right thing, and everything else is going chaos. He used the analogy, if you feel like you're lashed to the steering wheel of a ship and there's no one else on deck and there's a massive storm and you're being crashed around, that if you feel like that, congratulations, you have reached the middle passage and you are going to navigate that, and then you're going to do the second adulthood or the second journey. And that just gave me permission to be confused. And because I didn't have to work, I was looking after children. I wasn't I was a stay-at-home parent. But while they were at school, I would be going to the beach, going to the woods. I just gave myself permission to just, and in the process of doing that, I had the most profound creative inspiration for my novel, it turned out. And it completely changed the trajectory of that project. And that's how I've trusted the process. Because the more I lean into who I really am, the more everything else just seems to kind of figure itself out. And I know how that sounds, but that is my experience.
When did you write The Surfboard?
So I wrote that that's when I just had begun to figure out that I was doing the wrong thing. And I felt like I'd come to the edge of what I thought I was capable of doing. And I didn't know how to get beyond it. I think we'd hit like 3 or 4 million in revenue. We had like 45 members of staff. I just felt like I got to a place. I just wasn't sure if I had it in me to do any more. And I couldn't work out how to figure that out. And then I realized that if I could challenge another preconception I had of what I was capable of, in this case, I was rubbish at, always been terrible with my hands and never make anything. I'm terrible at DIY. I'm useless at all that kind of stuff. And I met a guy who makes wooden surfboards, and they're the most beautiful boards you've ever seen. And I said to him, God, that's amazing. I could never do that. And he says, yeah, you can. Come and camp near my workshop for a week and you'll leave with it. And I was like, dude, you have no idea how bad I am. And he said, no, come. So while I was trying to think of what could I do to prove to myself I can do things I don't think I can do, I went to Cornwall and I made a wooden surfboard. And it's on the wall over there. It's completely
Is it?
Yeah, should I show you?
Can you flip the screen? Sorry, audio people, go to YouTube and watch it.
There it is.
And that's so special because after I met Dan, I read the book, and it's such a simple concept, but it's just so deeply profound in the lesson of like being present in the moment, taking risks, just the way the guy like coached you, the sentences where he just leaves you in the room. And you're like,
he would just abandon me. I didn't know what to do, and he'd abandon me, and he'd be like, figure it out.
He'd abandon me. And then the parts where he helped you and you co-worked, like he would show you, and the just the poetry of writing the surfboard. It's just profound in hearing about the path of your life and at what point these creative processes and this is the you being fully yourself impact some of your decisions, is what I'm hearing. It's like a deeply profound marker point that then points you in a slightly back to your north, maybe.
Yeah, no, completely that. I mean, so what happened? The thing about the surfboard is that the reason it was transformational for me, and why I recommend anyone to go and make things if you're feeling weird, like mentally, mental health stuff,
Yeah.
is that everything I've achieved, I had, best-selling books. I've had books that won awards. I've run a business that was award-winning and, made a big impact in publishing. But when you're feeling terrible, and you're a bit depressed, you can wake up in the morning and it's so easy to persuade yourself, yeah, but I only got it because I was lucky, or I only did it because of this reason, or because I did it with that person, or because I happen to know people or who knew people. And you can very, very quickly completely trash your achievements in your own mind. But the reason the surfboard is amazing is because it's a physical representation of my ability to go beyond the preconception I had of what I was capable of, that I cannot deny when I'm feeling depressed because it's on the fucking wall. I can go and stroke it. I can't deny that I did it. And that is so profoundly important, because it means you can't go that much lower. So, well, I'll never go lower than that existing. And that is one of the most beautiful things I've ever seen, let alone, and I made it. And so it's kind of like it's not ego, it's more like, it's a terrible analogy, but it keeps me afloat. It stops me going under.
That's
right?
like, yeah.
I
chills.
can lie on it and I'll never drown because I've made that thing. And how many of us have something like that? Whether like you can look at it every day and go, I did that. And I can't really use it. I've tried to surf and I suck. Right?
That's not the point. That's not the
But
point. Maybe that's for the third phase of life.
I built a surfboard I can't even use, but that is the definition of doing something for its own sake.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You mentioned The Idle Traveler. That book had a great impact on me as well. Being one of the people that loves to see places and go places and the experience that different cultures can have on our existence and these different things. But the perspective of like getting out of the awful, soul destroying consumerist airport where you're packed into a tin can and you're all on this fucking journey of, and it's about the destination, not the journey. So the way you capture just like getting trains and doing things in a different way that allows for, like, we don't often think in Western society about how can we slow things down, right? We think, how can we speed things up so that we can get to this destination quicker? And so already I'm changing the way I think about this second stage of my life and how I go about things. A true impact. But it sounds like kind of through your pain of like being afraid of flying, you've discovered this way that has impacted so many people.
Yeah. Well, look, this is because I'm a man, right? Because I'm a man, I have this terrible flaw. So my only way of coping with it is to make a virtue of it. And go, oh, well, I didn't really fly. I
decided to go this way.
I just created a philosophy of travel to get over my fear.
Beautiful.
No, I mean, that is one of my life lessons, actually, is that in failure, in disaster, you always find the most life-changing realizations. And they are like my theory I've developed over my life is that fear is a compass. It's showing you where you need to go. Now, I'm scared to jump out of an airplane with no parachute. That's not what I mean. I mean, if you're scared to do things that other people will easily normally do, you've got to figure out why, and you've got to go through it. And I'm working on this for a book at the moment. I've got this theory that, when you're afraid to do something, you feel like you're missing the piece of yourself that would enable you to do it. And that's why you can't do it, because you are actually lacking in the capacity to do whatever it is. And what I've realized in my life through tons of different phobias, because flying was just the first, I was scared of lifts, taxi, buses, train, everything. And I had to kind of work through them all. And what I figured out is that you were right. You are missing a piece of yourself. And I don't know how it got there, but that missing piece of yourself is on the other side of the thing you're afraid to do. And that's why when you do those things, you feel more whole, because you're literally finding those lost pieces of yourself. And I'm going to go a bit out there now, but I really like you. I'm going to share this with you. I think
Thank you.
it's all building up to the greatest fear we all have of all, which is dying. And I think that's when you get the last missing piece of yourself. And that's when we become truly whole for, whatever's next. But having that attitude in your life, that the thing I'm afraid of is the compass telling me where to go. And I have to be, I love in your book, it's all about bravery. And you say bravery is confusion. It's like chaos. It's not knowing what the fuck you're doing. That's so important to understand that that's what the path looks like. So and it's James Hollis thing, if you feel disconcerted, if you feel lost, then that's great.
Yay.
Because that means you're pushing to something different. And we've had that knocked out of us, or we've had that taught out of us. I don't know. But I've been very lucky in that I had so many fears that I had to overcome, that I figured that out. So that I would encourage everyone to do that. If there's something that you're like that's getting in the way of your life, then there's something really profoundly wonderful that you're going to figure out by engaging with it. And I think that's what the second phase of life is all about, really. It's all about putting up with the discomfort, and because it's right and it's the right way. And the more of us that do it and talk about it and about how difficult it is, the easier it is for other people to take that chance too.
I could talk to you all day. Because as you know, I've been deep in that state of discomfort, and this world is set up to distract from it, to avoid it, to feel like there's something wrong. So if you just push forward in the blueprint of what you've been doing before, then everything's going to be okay. But then you feel like you're sleepwalking through life again. And, if you've had the opportunity of a mental health crisis in the past, that's a slippery slope to all things awful. Right. Mm-hmm. And so it's like cracking you open. But the terrifying thing is I've always had a sense of the thing. I've always, from the youngest age, and as you know, I grew up in a cult, and, I had a sense that books were important. I had a sense that young people were important. I had a sense that making an impact and sharing my voice in some way was important. So there was like this, okay, I don't know what container it's going to be in, but I know what the light is, and that there's a reason for it, something like that. And in this state of confusion, that bit has been hazy. And that's been a fucker to sit with, because right? Because I'm like, because I've even questioned purpose. Has my purpose just been tied up in giving my kids a better life, and moving away from something rather than towards? And it's not true fully, but it's been profoundly confusing and questioning. And I'm the person like you that gives people certainty. Right? That is think about it this way. Here's a philosophy or an idea, whatever. And now I'm sitting with yeah, I don't know, man.
But that's why I'm great at it, because I don't ever want to hear from someone that's got it all figured out. My favorite quote is Václav Havel, and it's follow the man who seeks the truth, run from the man who has found it.
I mean, right? So right.
Right? So I don't ever want to be given advice from somebody that's like, oh yes, I've got this all figured out.
This is
I'm
the path.
A guru on a mountain. It's like, no. I have 4 children. I'm paying, a massive mortgage. You have nothing to tell me, dude, on the hill in the Himalayas.
In the trenches. Yeah.
Right? That is of no use to me. I want to know from people that are failing every day, but still figuring it out. And I had a brilliant one yesterday where every now and then you get a parenting moment where you're like, oh, I did learn something in my life. My 7-year-old comes down last night. He's crying. Something bad's happened at school. And he won't go to sleep. And we're talking about it. And I synthesized everything I've ever learned with him, which this is not what happened to me, but this is what I've learned in my life. And this is why I think it's important, which relates to what you're just saying. And he was like, how do I make the pain go away? I feel really sad. How do I make it go away? And my brain just went, I said, Ted, the way you make pain go away is you let yourself feel it. You just sit in it. And he had a bit of a cry, and I gave him a hug. And 5 minutes later, we're laughing about something. And I'm getting emotional myself. we don't let ourselves feel it. You've got to feel the pain to get through it. And as you say, we're told to distract, buy this, go there, do this, do that. Sometimes you just have to sit in it. And being seen to sit in it can be really powerful too. So yeah, sit in the discomfort. It's there for a reason, and it's the longer you sit in
It's
it, the clearer it
information.
becomes. And you took what you just said about being hazy. Again, that's amazing, right? You thought you had it all figured out, and now you're questioning it. Well, that's brilliant. It doesn't mean what you were doing was wrong. It just
No.
meant what you were doing was right for then, and
Yes.
you're moving. So now you'll get a different perspective, and it's changing slightly. And what an amazing thing to spend the next year or two, or whatever, trying to spot. The key is the direction of movement. That's what I've learned.
Yeah.
As long as it's like I'm terrible at running, and I was trying to beat my times, and I kept running too fast, and then I'd have to stop and walk. And I realized I get my best times when I go so slowly, but I don't stop.
Mm.
Right? If you don't fucking stop,
Consistency.
just keep
Yeah.
it. It doesn't matter if you're going slowly, just don't stop. And I think it's that. As long as you're moving, you're going to get there. It's when you do fits and starts of change and then stasis. That's what we get locked in. That's what I got locked in.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Take a week off to do some writing. No, you need to do it every day a little bit. And it's that kind of discipline, maybe.
I think there is something about discipline, consistency, and showing up to your truth in a way that might be more formal or have a reflective points within it, and it's going to be different at different times for different people. You're just a beautiful soul, Dan, and I just
right back.
appreciate. Thank you. I appreciate meeting you. I appreciate your honesty, your vulnerability, and sharing water with you. Tell us finally just about your most recent books. I know you've got one out, and then where people can find you if they want to connect with you and your stuff.
So I've got Do Start is the book, which I haven't got one, which is terrible, but it's a book about how to run a business without losing your mind, and that's
Amazing.
for entrepreneurs. I have a website, dankieran.com. But there's something actually at the moment. I've just started doing a thing with two friends called The Second Journey, and it's basically how to change career in midlife. It's basically how to shift from the thing you thought you wanted to do into what you're doing, because that's what I did, and Nicola and Ben, who I'm doing it with, did. And we became the bridge for each other because there was no support and no one wants to talk about it. So we're trying to create a community of people who are just in that moment of uncertainty, who want to do something different, who want to just hang out with people who are doing the same thing and, learn stuff from each other. So that's a super early days thing. But if you find me on LinkedIn, you'll see posts to that. And we're doing another. We just did one in August, which was amazing, but we're doing another one in September, and we might even do courses. We're figuring it out at the moment.
This sounds exciting and well timed. Beautiful.
Yeah, I mean, I think that loads of people are going through it, right? Like our parents all had a one job for life. There's no chance we're going to do that, and our kids aren't going to do that. So handling this change and figuring out how to live more authentically, it's a kind of generational opportunity, and every generation that comes behind is going to need to know and have support for doing that. So I feel like it's a powerful thing. Yeah, it could be a powerful thing.
So powerful. I will throw all of this in the show notes, all the books. I'm definitely going to put some stuff on LinkedIn as well, just about how much your work and this conversation means to me. We need more people who are just honest about the journey to success and and then just the profound stuff you've said about how being in the confusion is actually where the opportunity lies. So poetic. Let's hang out soon. I hope you'll be in London soon. So thanks for sharing some time with me. Thanks so much.
It's been such a pleasure, and you're a superstar, and love your work. And thank you for having me.
Thank you.